Thank you, Dr. Uku. I think I'll start and pick from where Dr. Obura left in terms of coral reefs being in a good place in terms of the data from different stakeholders. I would like to start by stating that seagrasses, I mean, we need to move and we need to move a milestone also in terms of seagrasses, because they are the least studied ecosystems as far as I compare them with corals and mangroves. So I would start by introducing what actually seagrass are. I mean, they are flowering plants that live underwater, and they are primary producers that serve as a food source, and they're the important nearshore ecosystems that are critical in terms of providing livelihoods for our local coastal communities who depend solely mostly on the nearshore ecosystems for their livelihood. So I just move to the next slide, please. So yeah, in terms of appreciating them, we would kind of want to look at maybe there are species that are actually of concern that domicile in these ecosystems. And here we are talking about dugongs, we are talking about green turtles and seahorses, and even a species of seagrass called Dostera marina that have actually been red listed in the IUCN status as actually vulnerable or endangered. So that shows the importance of actually conservation in terms of looking at these aspects of species of concern, so that we can be able to understand and manage more these ecosystems. Next slide. So when we talk about the threats will not go very out of off from what the threats that coral ecosystems are going through, because we are talking about siltation from river discharges. We know we have great big rivers like River Tana, River Sabaki that releases a lot of silt from agricultural practices up the agricultural farms. This sometimes has an impact on seagrass ecosystems that are within the vicinity of these big rivers. We are also talking about coastal engineering works. We have seen development of beach walls. We have had dredging in our major port in Mombasa. We also have we've had activities of backfilling for jetties to be built and bridges, and also roads, which also has an impact because it leads to maybe some of these ecosystems being buried or getting destroyed altogether. Then we've had, we think we could have issues of oil spillage based on the busy port that we have, and also the issue of mechanical damage from fish practices. Most of our coastal fishermen using beach seines, and this actually does the physical damage to our seagrass. And then we also have the boat anchorage and propeller damages that as a result of pitching the boats around these near-shore areas. Then we have had episodes of this, the hotel industry clearing of these seagrasses that are found in the intertidal areas to create a good space for swimming and for tourists to swim, a place that is clean according to the interpretation. And one of the major things that I would highlight is the last point. We've had issues of arching explosions that have actually been a main concern for the seagrasses, especially along the coastline of Kenya, where we've had a species of arching called Trypnosis gratila actually destroying the beds and leaving areas that are left are barren. And sometimes there's recovery, sometimes there will not be recovery. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk about the effects of these changing landscapes. We have seen there has been loss of seagrass. There is some natural recovery that has been seen in some areas, although the natural recovery would be slower compared to the rate at which the habitats are getting lost. We have seen issues of habitats, seagrass habitats being fragmented as a result of destruction, where they used to exist as extensive meadows. Now they become fragmented, and this impacts actually the functioning of these systems. Then we've seen the structure of the food webs also being affected. We've tried to look a little about, there's not a lot of research, I would say, that has been done in seagrass areas, but the little that we've done, we've seen a lot of changes in the associated communities, starting from the lower levels, which might also have implications, even as we are looking at the distribution of maybe the fish, which is a food source for our local communities. And then we anticipate that maybe we will see some regime shifts in seagrass ecosystems in future if nothing is changed. I mean, if something is not done, because so far, like now, we have seen alterations in terms of the community composition of seagrass ecosystems, where we are moving some in places from monospecific meadows and now coming into mixed meadows. And then the mixed meadows would comprise of actually most pioneer species, which are not stable, and that is an indication of the instability of the systems, because it indicates that there is continuous disturbance that makes this place not to be stable. Next, please. So in terms of the lessons we've learned from what we have done as a small seagrass community, I mean, people who are interested in doing seagrass research, we have seen impacts of nutrient loading on associated fauna. We have been looking at this from the small lens of the epiphytes that are associated with seagrass beds that are actually very important drivers of this ecosystem, because when you look at fish and small fish, they depend on these communities for their survival, and later on, then they are able to survive in this ecosystem. So in terms of nutrient loading, whatever we have been able to see, it's not extensive research in the different areas we've seen that there is actually the associated fauna, the small sensitive fauna are more sensitive, the small fauna are more sensitive actually than the primary consumers. This could be because maybe the levels of nutrient loading per se are absorbed by the system, because we know that the seagrass ecosystems are able to use the nutrients for their growth, and probably this has not reached the level that would cause eutrophication and actually the loss of the seagrass plants themselves. Then we have also seen that the recovery of this associated fauna will actually depend on the recovery of the seagrass themselves. So when you have seagrass being lost because of the environmental stressors, for the ecosystem to return to the speed at which the ecosystem returns into a functional one will depend on the speed at which now the seagrass themselves will recover, because these other associated communities are more dependent on the seagrass structure for their survival and for also their growth. Then we've been able to see that there has been a lot of disturbance across the coastline, with specific areas that have continuous disturbances, for instance, in Diani in the south and even in Watamu in the north, where now you have the system sometimes recovering, but because of these continuous disturbances, the higher productivity, the community of the productivity of the associated community is not stable, because they sometimes rely on the long-lived canopy, because if the canopy is short-lived, it is destroyed, it recovers, destroyed. There is no time for settlement of maybe the associated epiphytes and other plants and animals that really support this ecosystem. Next. Yeah, so there has been attempts in restoration that we've piloted some project in restoration, and we have tried different techniques, and we have seen that there has been some success that has been observed. This is in terms of trying to look at whether actually, I would say, is it restoration or rehabilitation that can work for us. So in terms of the places where we have seen success, these areas are mainly the sheltered areas because they protect the structure when it's planted from wave action, so that the structure can be able to be stable before it matures into a productive meadow. And we are saying that restoration is hard because it is difficult to take the system back to the original place where it was if we are talking about restoration. But rehabilitation, we have seen, is feasible so long as you can be able to plant seagrass, even though it was not the original species that was in that area. You are able to return the system into a functional level that can support productivity. Then we've seen that there is need to actually map the potential areas for rehabilitation, because not every place will be suitable for rehabilitation. But I want to stress and also say that it is important actually to look at natural recovery, because rehabilitation might be costly, but where there is possibility to remove stressors and a system is able to recoup itself, I mean, that would be the best process that can be that can work for a vast area. And then we have seen that it is important to work with the community-based units in terms of trying to do the rehabilitation processes, because this adds the strength to the process when they understand why this is important for them, and they can able to work hand in hand in trying to ensure that this process is successful. And also this joins in with now community engagement, now where we engage the BMU members in actually trying to actively do the rehabilitation process, explain to them the needs, train them on how to monitor, so that it is maybe looking at citizen science moving forward, rehabilitation projects across the coast. Then we also have seen that long-term rehabilitation projects that have already set out success parameters to measure progress are important, because communities will be informed about these impacts, so that when they are doing restoration, they are not looking at if they don't understand the parameters that we are trying to bring to measure so that we can look at restoration, they will be looking at a shorter goal. And that means that if you are involving them in these projects, the project will not go far, because they think it's a win-win. It's now, I plant today and tomorrow I see success. So it's important to have the set out success parameters and have the people who are engaged in this actually understanding the end process, so that you are able to ensure the success of such response mechanisms in terms of ensuring that our ecosystems are actually conserved. Next slide. So from this, in this MSP process, we have a few issues that we think can help to work out the process in terms of as far as seagrass habitats are concerned. Number one, we are talking about ground truthing as an important aspect. We lack sufficient data to be able to advise and to be able to give important support decisions in terms of what is where as far as seagrass habitats are concerned. So we are talking about a lot of maybe involvement of ground truthing and monitoring practices or aspects in this process, so that we also involve we engage the participatory kind of process, where we work with citizens or stakeholders who are involved, who are concerned, so that we are able to be to look at the critical sites that are important in terms of when you talk about seagrass habitats. We also are calling out for engaging experts for sound and up-to-date science decisions so that we can minimize impacts, because we know there's a lot of developments that will take place across, along the coastline. So what we are calling for is that the experts will be engaged so that we can have decisions that would support development, at the same time conservation of these ecosystems in the most prudent way. And then we are also saying that we can upscale the best practices in seagrass rehabilitations so that we are able to cater for the loss of habitats that will be caused as a result of development. And this kind of practices would be simple low-tech methods that can be embraced by local communities, because we know development will not stop. We have to develop. And I am happy that even at the regional level, we have through the National Nairobi Convention, we have restoration guidelines that have been developed, and this will go hand in hand, I mean, and in a long way to help us to look at ways in which we can upscale good practices of rehabilitation across the coastline in areas that will need rehabilitation. Then there is an important aspect of looking at the linkage between the seagrass conservation or rehabilitation projects with the economic benefits. And here it means livelihoods, because when you look at ecosystems like coral reefs, there is direct benefits that accrue that can be seen by communities. When you look at mangrove ecosystems, communities are able to get direct benefits. But when we talk about seagrass, most people just think these are just ecosystems that are not important for conservation. And even when you are setting out rehabilitation projects with communities, they want to look at the end goal in terms of their livelihoods. What is the benefit that they will get out of this? So we need to start looking at how we can link these two, livelihoods and conservation, so that we can ensure that in the areas that we need to conserve or to rehabilitate, then we are supporting also livelihood so that we can forge this agenda ahead. We also think that when we strengthen the framework, the ICZM framework, so that it can support the connectivity of these seagrass ecosystems with the other ecosystems, critical ecosystems, it would be important, because this will enhance productivity and resilience, because these ecosystems are interlinked. They don't live in isolation one with the other. Next. Yeah, so maybe this, we also propose to have financing of seagrass conservation through the payment of ecosystem service projects. We have seen success in Mikoko Pamoja. That is one of the projects that one of the best projects along the coastline of Kenya, and I have seen it's moving now into embrace seagrass. So I think we can support such projects to even include seagrass within them, because then the value for seagrass conservation is felt and is seen. And then as we've talked about the key species of concern, there's need to also to put in consideration these species when we are doing conservation, or even when we are doing development or spatial planning, which areas support these key species that are of concern, some which are vulnerable and some that are endangered, and make a deliberate effort maybe to conserve the ecosystems on that basis. And then there is also the need to understand, I mean, more research and more activities to be able to look at the responses of responses and resilience of these meadows based on the internal and external stressors that they experience, so that we are able to, when we are doing the planning, we are able to look at this wholesomely and have informed decisions on how and where and the importance and why we should conserve these areas. Then there is also the need for deliberate inclusion of seagrass conservation and management in marine protected areas, so that we can support key functional biota, because nationally we don't have any management plan that specifically advocates for seagrass. And as I will link that to the last point that, as Dr. Obura stated also, we need to integrate policy instruments that will protect this ecosystem and promote their resilience to long-term change, because we have the coral and coral reef and seagrass ecosystem conservation strategy. That was a well-thought process, and I think even as we consider moving forward, this is a key document and something that we might need to embrace in terms of when trying to ensure that these areas are considered even as we continue with the marine spatial process. And I think that is all from my talk today. Thank you.